him tell the entire story because it's his story, and I know he's told it a million times, but I'd like to hear you guys to hear it from his mouth. I'm going to be passing out some index cards while he's talking and some pens, and you can all write your questions down and pass them up to me if you have questions. We'll have a chance, I'll have a chance to read all these questions to you. So, Kurt, if you want to start by just going over what happened and,
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay. There's a lot to this, so it's going to take me a little bit to tell the story, but I think if you listen to everything I have to say here, you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, which is that I believe the U.S. government intentionally staged this plot by providing the underwater bomber an intentionally defective bomb. So with that in mind, keep your mind open to what I'm telling you, and I'll go through it piece by piece, and you can see how I lay out my case to come to this conclusion. Now, that wasn't my initial conclusion. Let me go back to the start, and we'll take it piece by piece. My wife and I were in Uganda. We were on an African safari, and we're coming back. We flew to Kenya first, and then to Amsterdam, and then our connecting flight back was to Detroit. And it all started in Amsterdam. They do the security a little different in Amsterdam. They do the security at the gate. Unlike here in Detroit, I don't know how they do it in Rhode Island, but here in Detroit, once you go through security, you can go from gate to gate and mingle with passengers from different flights. But in Amsterdam, you go through security at the gate, and then you're in a room with only people on your flight. So we had gone through security, and it was Christmas Day, 2009, and everyone had, Christmas presents, a lot of baggage, heavy coats, and there were not two seats together anywhere. So my wife and I sat on the floor by the gate. By the gate, I mean the aisle you go down to get on the plane. And there's a desk there with a lady working there. I'll call her the ticket agent. So we sat on the floor there, maybe about 10 feet away, and we started playing cards, just passing time. And I was facing the ticket gate, and my wife Lori was facing me. So she had her back to what I saw. And what I saw was an Indian man who looked like he was about 50 years old in a tan suit. He looked like he had some money, looked like he was wealthy. And he was walking with an African, I thought he was a teenager, maybe about 16, and he was wearing jeans and a white t-shirt only. He didn't have any bags with him, he didn't have a coat with him, he didn't have any heavy clothes, nothing. And I was just watching the two to figure out why they were together. I was just kind of people watching as we played cards. And they walked to the ticket desk together, and just the Indian man spoke. And what he said was, this man needs to get on a plane, but he doesn't have a passport. I'm talking about the African man. And the ticket agent then said, well, you have to have a passport to get on the plane. And the Indian man then kind of argued with her, and what he said was, he's from Sudan, we do this all the time. That's a word-for-word quote. And she still wouldn't let him on the plane, so she referred them down the hallway to a manager and pointed, and they went down the hallway on their own. And a couple to this man spoke perfect English. I didn't detect any accent at all. He was obviously in some sort of powerful position to be able to do this. He did not have a security uniform on, so I don't believe he was part of security. And he was allowed to go down this hallway, the secure hallway, without an escort, with just himself and the African teenager. Now, at the time, this meant absolutely nothing to me. It meant so little I didn't even tell my wife. I was thinking, this guy's not going to get on the plane. So later on, we boarded the plane, and as we're coming in to land into Detroit, about 8 hours later, the same African, what I thought was a teenager, I come to find out he was 23 then, but he tried to blow up our plane. Just after the pilot came on the loudspeaker and said, flight crew, take your seats, we're going to be landing here in a few minutes, one of the flight attendants walked by my seat and said, something smells like smoke. as she walked by, and they got me to look up, and I could see 8 rows ahead to the left, by the window, smoke coming up. And I got onto my seat and ran out the aisle to get a better look. And as I was doing that, the whole area burst into flames. And as I was looking at that, another passenger grabbed this African man, I didn't recognize him yet, and hauled him into the first class area. Now there wasn't a fight, there wasn't any screaming, he just kind of grabbed him and hauled him away. So I didn't know if he was hurt in a freak fire or what was going on yet. But people were screaming, even the flight crew was screaming. It was a pretty scary moment. And one of the flight attendants grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran over, and within about a minute had the fire put out.
So I'm sorry, the flight crew was screaming?
Yeah.
Which
yes,
which
it was
airline
very scary.
Yeah, which airline was this?
Delta.
Okay.
Delta. Believe me, it's very scary when a flight attendant is standing, you're screaming at the top of her lungs.
Which is like kind of what they've been trained to do, is like when there's an emergency, they're supposed to, So continue. Go ahead.
The pilot came back on the loudspeaker and said, "Emergency landing." He just said 2 words. And he sounded kind of shook up. And you could feel the plane speeding up instead of slowing down coming to land. And he basically floored it, I think. And we were on the ground about 10 minutes later. I was thinking we would get off the plane by the emergency chutes, all the emergency doors were open, we'd jump out right away in the middle of the runway. No, that's not what happened. We landed, we taxied like you normally do, all the way up to the terminal. The FBI gets on the plane and basically tells everyone to sit down and shut up because you're not getting off the plane. And they just stayed in the first class area for about 20 to 30 minutes, didn't even check on anyone else or to see if there was any accomplices or any other bombs or anything like that. At this point, we didn't even know it was a bomb, though. So we just wanted off the plane. After about 20 or 30 minutes of sitting there, the underwear bomber is escorted off in handcuffs. Before they took him off, he stood in the hallway for about 20 to 30 seconds, and that's when I got a good look at him, and that's when I realized it was the same guy that I saw before we boarded. And I turned to my wife, Lori, and I said, "I think I might have saw something important." And that was kind of when it hit me to what I had seen before we boarded in Amsterdam and how important it might be. So he was taken off, and then we were taken off. We were allowed to take our carry-on bags, which I thought was another huge mistake then. Being an attorney, we're destroying the crime scene.
Right.
Taking our carry-on bags off, we walked literally next to the seat where he was sitting. Well, I'm sorry, he sat 2 seats from the aisle, so the seat next to where he was sitting. But there was bomb residue all over this area. It was burned, and here we are trampling through it as we get off the plane, and I'm just shaking my head at this.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt. Now, at some point, like when the FBI came on and said nobody can leave their seats, did they take any photographs or touch any evidence at that point while everybody was sitting there?
They stayed in the first class area. They didn't even come in the rest of the plane, and he was not in the first class area, so that area just sat there.
Okay.
And I weren't anywhere near that area.
Wow. And then I had heard an interview with you on some, I don't know which outlet it was, but you had said that there was a person who was videotaping on the plane, people getting on the plane. Is that still part of? Yeah.
Now, I didn't witness this person, and the reason I didn't see him was because between his seat and my seat was the bathroom.
Okay.
So I couldn't have seen this, but there were other passengers that have come out and said there was this guy that started videotaping before the incident happened, all the way through it until after it ended, which is pretty peculiar if you ask me. You know, I was sure I was going to die. So when you think you're going to die, you're not sitting there filming an entire incident, you know, not turning off your video camera. It's just ridiculous.
Right. You're supposed to be getting in that crouch position or something, right?
You're right. You're thinking about your family and, you know, how you're going to die and you're not going to see them again and that sort of thing. Right. So very strange. By the way, I was contacted by another passenger later on, and I was going to tell you this in a little bit, but he said, "Hey, I know who this guy was that filmed the entire incident." And I said, "Really? Can you give me his contact information?" And he did. And I sent him an email and he didn't respond. And I sent him another email, and about a week later I got a response from his attorney, and no communication from him. But anyway, so yeah, other passengers have said that, but I can't say that I personally saw it because I didn't.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So then we're taken off the plane with our carry-on bags. We're taken into a luggage claim area that had been evacuated already. Yeah. And there was nobody there, nothing. And we're all told to stand along a wall with our carry-on bags. And we stood there for about an hour. Again, we don't know if there's an accomplice. We don't know if there's another bomb. Totally putting our lives in jeopardy standing there. And after about an hour, the FBI brought in bomb-sniffing dogs. And one of them found something in the bag.
Wait a second.
Of another.
I'm sorry, there's an hour delay before they brought the bomb-sniffing dogs? It took an hour?
Yes, we just stood there for an hour along the wall. Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so one of them, the FBI takes the dogs around to each of us, sniffing our carry-on bags. And one of them finds something in the bag of another Indian man, different one. This one's around age 30, so about 20 years younger than the other man. And he had on an orange shirt. And he's since become known as the man in orange. The other man, the media has called the sharp dressed man, the man in tan suit. So I'll refer to them as that to not confuse them. But this man in orange was immediately taken away by the FBI for questioning with his bag. He wasn't handcuffed yet. They took him into a side room for questioning where we could see the door. He was in there for about an hour. Then the FBI took him out and they handcuffed him and took him away. As they were taking him away, a different FBI agent came up to the rest of us passengers and said, I'm sure you've seen what has just happened here. It's not safe here. We need to evacuate this area and take you to another area. And then we were escorted out of this area and taken to a hallway where we had to stand for the next 4 hours or so. We were held for about 6 hours. We weren't allowed to call anyone, we weren't allowed to drink anything, we couldn't eat anything, we couldn't text, we couldn't go to the bathroom for a long time, and then they made it a little more lenient and let us go with an FBI agent one at a time. So it was really tight security. After about 5-6 hours, the head FBI agent came up to the rest of us and said, we believe we have those responsible for this in custody. Those, not the man, not him or the perpetrator, those, plural. And then he said, we're going to do interviews of each of you family by family, and then you'll be free to go. And that's what they did. And when it came to be our turn, this is when I first told the FBI the story that I've been repeating ever since. And believe me, we were in shock. So, you know, some people are saying that I made up this story for one reason or another. No, this is the same story I told right after we landed. It hasn't changed a bit. You know, this is not a place that I'd be making up stories to risk my legal career while I'm in shock for no purpose. But I told the FBI this story. They seemed pretty interested. At the time, the agent that was interviewing us actually called over another FBI agent to sit in and listen and take notes. And then we were free to go. We went home. And the next day, I made a comment. This blew up in the media for the first 24 hours. You know, really big. It was a big story. And I put a comment on an internet message board that I was on the flight. And a reporter called me within an hour. And I did a quick interview with her on MLive.com. And then it just kind of blew up after that. I kept getting calls from media all over the world. Every TV station, every newspaper, or pretty much every reporter in the world was calling me. And they were actually reporting my story accurately for a while, asking questions about what happened and that sort of thing. And that would change later, but I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I'm writing this down, media. Wanted to hear this one for you. Go ahead.
Right. A few interesting things came out early on. One was a Dutch media report that indicated that the Dutch military police said the underwear bomber did not go through normal security measures at